Hello and welcome to Tennessee Informer. I'm your host, Dave Vance. Tonight our guest is David Seal from Jefferson County, Tennessee, who will be with us for just a little while tonight for an important update on support for nullification legislation in Tennessee. But first, it's time for announcements and updates. If you have an announcement from a conservative organization you want announced on this show, send the information to tninformer.tv@gmail.com the Friday before the show. The Stewart and Henry County TFA, that's Tennessee Firearms Association, will have their monthly meeting this Thursday, November 2nd, 7 p.m. at the Stewart County Visitor Center. Our speaker is Paul Engel, a writer whose articles have appeared in national publications, a talk show host, and founder of the Constitution Study, where he uses his expertise on the Constitution to inform others. He also has been one of the past guests on this show. His topic for the meeting is the Constitution is the greatest protection for your life, not just the Second Amendment. Should be interesting. Hope to see you there whether you're a member or not. For good conservative talk radio, tune in to 105.3 WDXC Radio in Lawrenceburg from 5 to 6 p.m. on Mondays for the Kit Capley Show, and Wednesdays from 5 to 6 p.m. for the local GOP radio show hosted by Chair of the Lawrence County GOP, Brandon Taylor, and Lawrence Sutton, the Secretary of Lawrence County GOP. And now on Fridays with free speech news featuring Lawrence Sutton and Chris Morris, the Chair of the Giles County GOP and an SEC member from 5 to 6 p.m. If you want our state to step up and push back on our overreaching, often unconstitutional federal government, visit tncss@weebly.com and learn more about the nullification legislation, that's House Bill 0726, that we hope to get passed this session. There's no cost, it's an informational site, but we'd like for you to click on the Substack tab to sign up. We need as many people as we can get to show support for this effort. Please talk to your state rep and state senator now and get their commitment to support this very important piece of legislation. Help put some teeth in the 10th. And remember, in October of 2021, during the COVID scamdemic, our state legislature passed a joint resolution, SJR 9005, in regards to federal overreach that, along with many additional indisputable supporting constitutional facts, stated the following. Whereas each member of the General Assembly has taken an oath to uphold the Constitution of Tennessee and the Constitution of the United States, and whereas if the federal government intends to overreach its authority to the point that it assumes the traditional constitutional role of a state legislative body, it is only fitting and proper that the very existence as well as the depth and breadth of this federal power be condemned and challenged, not just in a court of law, but also through actions of the General Assembly to nullify such federal overreach. Now therefore, be it resolved by the Senate of the 112th General Assembly of the State of Tennessee, the House of Representatives concurring, that the State of Tennessee condemns any attempt by the federal government to penalize or tax citizens on this state in an effort to enforce an unconstitutional mandate regarding COVID-19 vaccinations, or other COVID-related restrictions and requirements. Be it further resolved that it is the right of the Tennessee General Assembly to enact such legislation as it deems necessary to nullify actions taken by the federal government regarding COVID-19 when those actions violate the United States Constitution. Be it further resolved, the Tennessee General Assembly urges the Attorney General and Reporter of the State of Tennessee to initiate or intervene in one or more civil actions on behalf of the State of Tennessee, or any alternative, seek appropriate relief in a federal court of competent jurisdiction regarding COVID-19 mandates issued by the federal government, and any actions taken by the federal government, including the President, the head of any department or agency, or any other employee of the executive branch of the federal government in violation of federal law or is prohibited by the 10th Amendment to the United States Constitution or any other statutory or constitutional provisions of the United States or the State of Tennessee with respect to the implementation or enforcement in this state of any provision of the federal government's mandate that requires citizens of this state to either receive a COVID-19 vaccination or submit to routine testing. So while this resolution concerned the COVID vaccines and testing, the principles they base the resolution on are still firm for everything else. They apply to anything else that's a violation of the Constitution, specifically the 10th Amendment. And notice they claim not just a right of nullification that was limited to court action, but a responsibility because of their oath of office to the state and the Constitution. So House Bill 0726, Senate Bill 1092 That's all it does is create multiple processes for nullification of unconstitutional federal action. In support of the legislature's stated position and the proposed legislation, the Jefferson County Commission passed a resolution on October 16th. Here to talk with us tonight about the resolution is the author of the resolution, David Seal. David Seal is a retired Jefferson County educator. He's a recognized artist, a local businessman, 917 volunteer, current chairman of the Jefferson County Republican Party. He has also served as Jefferson County Commissioner and is a citizen lobbyist for the people on issues such as eminent domain, property rights, education, and broadband accessibility to the state level. Columnist for the Jefferson County Post column on vital policy and contributor to the Tennessee Conservative News. Dave, thank you for joining us.
Glad to be here, Dave. Thank you for having me. And that introduction made me sound great.
Well, you're doing some great work, that's for sure. I kind of laid out just a little bit of that resolution that was passed in 2021. And, the good thing about it is our state has already said, hey, nullification is not a theory, it's a responsibility. And so, that to me, that's encouraging. And as a reminder, we just want our state legislature, we're not asking to pass nullification, they already have that. We're asking them to create multiple processes. You want to talk about that just a little bit?
Yeah, sure. It creates 5 pathways. And by the way, the reason that I got into this is that I watched the video of Representative Bud Hulsey explaining this to the Public Service Committee, and I was highly impressed with it. I've written an article about that, stating that particular speech he made to that committee should be required in all of our civics classes and government classes in the state of Tennessee.
Absolutely.
And just to very quickly go through what Bud's legislation would do, and Janice Bowling's in the Senate, is number one, the governor would have executive power to nullify things that affected the executive department of government. The second would be legislatively a bill of nullification, which would allow the General Assembly, if they recognize something that was above and beyond the 18 mandates of the United States Constitution, they could produce a bill of nullification. It provides pathways for state courts to nullify federal action. And another way is that 10 counties could put together a petition of nullification. If 10 counties saw a problem with federal action, they could ask our legislature to put through a bill of nullification. Or if they couldn't get their county governments to do that by majority vote, 2,000 registered voters could petition the Speaker of the House and Senate for nullification of certain things.
Right. And to clarify, that doesn't necessarily mean something would be nullified. It would mean that the legislature would have to vote up or down. It's not something, it's not creating a bill to go through committee and get killed. The legislature will have to listen to it, evaluate it, and vote up or down. Yeah, we think we should nullify this. No, we don't think that we have the right to nullify this because we think it's constitutional. So that's what it does in a nutshell.
One of the things that impressed me about it is that it bypasses the committee process. If legislators feel that it's that important, they can take this straight to the floor. They don't have to deal with committees on this.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, let's talk about your resolution that you authored and got passed through in Jefferson County, through the Jefferson County Commission. And so I'm assuming that you were motivated by what you saw Bud Hulsey's presentation. And is that when you decided, hey, I want to do a resolution for my county to support this? Or what led you to write that resolution?
Actually, my motivation came in when I watched the Senate video, the corresponding Senate bill that Janice Bowling had moved. Janice is a good friend of mine, and I thought it would just go right through, but it didn't go through. It didn't get a second in committee. Senator Pody was kind enough to move it. Nobody provided a second, and we've been in a holding pattern ever since. And I wrote the resolution late one night just for my county commission. I was going to present it to them and see if they wanted to do it. And my motivation was that it just didn't get through in the Senate committee that it was in. And I wanted to see if I could get some counties on board. And of course, Jefferson County did. I called one of my good friends on County Commission, Commissioner Janet Norton, who's a staunch conservative. She immediately read it, decided she wanted to do it. And after that, I asked her if she wanted me to check with the other members of the County Commission and see if they would be willing to co-sponsor. And one after another did. I didn't have anybody hesitate. Each commissioner that I spoke to signed on to it, with the exception of one or two wanted to read it before they signed on to it, but most of them just signed on to it sight unseen and decided that it was a tremendous thing for us to do. And of course, you're showing the co-sponsors there on the screen right now. They were very quick to sign on.
Wow, I'm surprised that at county level you got that much support that fast for something like this. That's great. But now, you said you're friends with Janice. Is that part of her district?
No, Jefferson County is not in her district. She represents a district near Tullahoma. It's about 3 hours of drive from Jefferson County.
Okay.
Janice and I worked together on some eminent domain bills, and she has pulled me out of the fire on multiple occasions in the General Assembly, and has really helped us with property rights in the legislature.
Right. Well, and I know she's one of the better ones up there. One of the, we only have in the Senate, we only have a few decent ones, and she's one of the best. I think there's her and maybe one more that are just top notch in terms of they're consistently going to sponsor the conservative things that we need sponsored. And now I want people to understand that it didn't get through the committee, but let's not forget, and I'm sure you know this, that was the very day after McNally's little internal poll, his internal confidence poll after his online shenanigans with some young homosexual that he was going back and forth with online. And, my guess is, and matter of fact, I've been told this by some other people, not Janice. I haven't talked to Janice, but she's pretty vocal about those things. And I would say that she probably didn't lend him any support for sticking around. And we know how petty they are up there sometimes. And so her bill didn't get a second. I don't think it had anything to do with the content. It was all about political revenge. Matter of fact, in that same committee that same day, there were some other good bills that another senator who's one of the few stellar ones up there, that any other time I'm pretty sure that bill would have gotten heard. His didn't get a second either. Matter of fact, Mark Pody made a motion for both of his, and neither one got a second. So that's just political revenge. I don't think people should take that as a sign that this, oh, well, it doesn't have a chance in the Senate. Number one, it's still alive. It was not voted down, so it's still alive. And we're going to bring it back this year and hopefully get it through.
There's a lot of people that don't realize that we're about to enter the second year of a 2-year cycle. And those bills that were not actually voted down are still alive in those committees. Absolutely.
So you have any other thoughts or comments on the importance of this issue?
Well, I'd like to, in order to get other counties to sign on to this, I'd like to make a couple of suggestions. Number one, if you're a citizen or a party chairman or an activist, do the heavy lifting for your county or your city. Go ahead and get the resolution, tailor it to to your city or county, get it to one or two sponsors, and get them to put it on their agenda. And if they need assistance with it, or if they need someone to help get it through the county commission, be willing to make calls, sit down with the local legislators one at a time like I did, and get people to sign on to it. Now, you probably won't get it done as fast as I did. I got the sponsors and co-sponsors in about 48 hours, but I work with them quite often on things. But if you're not used to that, don't be afraid to get out to your county commissioner and put this in front of them and say, listen, we need to do this, and I'll help you with it.
Yeah. And you have to understand the issue well enough to take it in front of them. You can't just hand it to them and not really understand what's on that paper yourself and expect them to to just run it through for you. You're really lucky. You're well known in your district, and apparently you got a good relationship with all your commissioners. I'm still impressed that you got it through that easy at the county level for something like this. And you know, hats off to you. And it was a great resolution. We're looking at that in our county, and I'm kind of using yours as a guideline. I would only add to that, I would encourage people to make sure your county commission understands, hey, look, this is not about passing nullification. This is processes, and remind them that in 2021, our state legislature, which most all of them are still there, that signed on to it. And you can go on the website and you can see who signed on to it. They've already said, we have a right to nullify, we have a responsibility to nullify, and we're not limited to just court action. So we're not having to fight that fight. The fight is, let's create multiple processes so that we make sure this happens.
You are exactly right in educating yourself on the issue and being able to answer questions if you're ever put in front of them at the podium, like I have been on many occasions. And but I'll tell you this, in talking to these commissioners, I've had some reservations about it before I sent it out to them, but they suffer the effects of federal overreach every time they have a meeting. They know what we're trying to do. It's just getting them to do it sometimes is the part you have to do the lifting on.
Right. Well, and really what you're doing with these county resolutions, you are supporting the resolution that the state legislature passed in 21, and now we're supporting legislation just to create, like say, multiple processes to make these kind of things happen. Right. So, well, I'd encourage everybody, if you have questions, go to the tncss.weebly.com website. Dave, I appreciate you being with us. Look forward to working with you on this and other things in the future. Any parting thoughts? No, just don't be afraid to exercise your civic duty to get things done. I mean, I guess I'm not to brag about this, but I'm one person who just started this, and if one person can get it going, somebody else like me can get it going in another district, and I would encourage them to do that. Absolutely, absolutely. Well, hey, thanks again. I definitely have you back. There's a lot of other topics that you're well versed on, and so I'd definitely like to have you back, and I thank you for coming on tonight. Thank you so much, Dave. So now to the topic of the threat posed by our open border because of this Fed-led invasion. Now, our border has been open for most of the last 20 years, so there are no doubt enemies of our country from all over operating here. I'm surprised we haven't already been hit again since 9/11 or in a major way. But the first thing I want to talk about tonight on this topic is responsibility. Now, Article 4, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution says, the United States shall guarantee to every state in the Union a Republican form of government and shall protect each of them against invasion and on application of the legislature or the executive when the legislature cannot be convened against domestic violence. Now, I doubt the founders ever imagined the possibility of a Fed-led invasion, but that's what we have right now. So not only is our federal government not upholding their duty, they've turned the whole thing on its head. They're leading this invasion. Now, as I understand it, Texas has referenced Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3 in justifying its actions on the border. Not that justification is needed. They're doing what they have to do to protect their border. Article 1, Section 10, Clause 3 says, no state shall, without the consent of Congress, lay any duty of tonnage, keep troops or ships of war in time of peace, enter in any agreement or compact with another state or with a foreign power, or engage in war unless actually invaded, and Texas is actually being invaded, or in such imminent danger as will not admit of delay. So when your federal government is leading the invasion, yeah, you can't wait. You have to do something. I would say we're all in such imminent danger as will not admit of delay or a further delay. But the question for all of us now is really a question for our state governments, since we are all border states now. The question is, what are the states going to do about the situation? The administration has shown it's not going to do anything to secure our border. Now, you've got all the millions of illegals, which no doubt includes enemies of our country and terrorists that are already here. Pick a country. I'm sure we've got plenty of them here that want to do us harm. Are you okay with your state limiting its action to just suing the Biden administration? Now, our state's done that, as have other states. Is that lawsuit going to keep you and your family safe? Is it acceptable to you that immigration and border security are considered federal responsibilities? And if they choose not only not to secure our borders and to ignore federal laws on immigration, but to lead the invasion of our states, that we get stuck with the financial tab in addition to the threat posed by the invasion? Is the Constitution a suicide pact? Do our states not retain any sovereignty when we ratified the Constitution? Did we give up all sovereignty? No, we've already discussed that earlier. Did they agree to be at the mercy of the federal government in all things? The federal government has no right to endanger the people of the states. It has no right to use our money to support invaders. It has no right to force us to use our tax dollars, both federal and state, to house, feed, educate, provide health care to people who they assisted in coming here or otherwise came here illegally. For our state government to continue to allow this is complicity. Now, our state specifically has been complicit through the passage of legislation allowing illegal aliens to obtain professional licenses and issue permits to private groups known to provide lodging and resources to illegal aliens, which, by the way, groups like the NFIB and Chamber of Commerce supported the professional license bill known as the Workforce Expansion Bill, passed in 2022, sponsored by Republican Senator Shane Reeves and Democrat Representative Bob Freeman. That kind of garbage has to stop. Our state legislature has to not only demagnetize our state from illegal aliens, but has to actively interfere with the federal government bringing them into Tennessee. If that requires buses back to the border or to other states and taking the business license of any that cater to them, then that's what needs to happen. If that means more drastic action like denying all but emergency medical help for life or limb, then that's what needs to happen. Ditto allowing them to attend schools, which is the result of another moronic decision by the Supreme Court. Actually, I should say opinion. It's time for state action, but we have to demand it. Now, to address one threat from our open borders and an ideology that is a threat wherever it is encountered, the attack by the Islamic animals known as Hamas on Jewish civilians should be yet another wake-up call to everyone about the nature of Islam. Reports of beheadings to include children, infants, rapes of women and children, murder and kidnapping of others, both men and women, as sickening as they are a reminder of the evil that comes from a death cult founded by a raping, murdering pedophile that married a 6-year-old and consummated the marriage when she was all of 9. Make no mistake about it. When they say from the river to the sea, all of Palestine shall be free, they mean to exterminate all the Jews. I personally hope that Israel is successful in exterminating all of Hamas and neutralizing its supporters, although that's a tall order. Oh, and the Muslims have a saying too. First the Saturday people, meaning the Jews, then the Sunday people, meaning us. And for those that might think the Muslim countries just hate us for our support of Israel, think again. Consider this from our early history. In 1786, Jefferson and John Adams met with Tripoli's ambassador to Great Britain. They asked his diplomat by what right his nation attacked American ships and enslaved their citizens, and why the Muslims held such hostility towards this new nation, which neither Tripoli nor any of the other Barbary Coast nations had had previous contact. The answer was quite revealing. He replied that Islam was founded on the laws of their prophet, and that it was written in their Quran that all nations who should not acknowledge their authority were sinners, that it was their right and duty to make war upon them wherever they could be found, and to make slaves of all they could take as prisoners, and that every Muslim who should be slain in battle was sure to go to paradise. With our open border, we could very well experience attacks like the one in Israel or another on the scale of September 11th. Now, before I get to the rest of the information I'll be covering tonight, and it relates to what we've talked about in the border and the Islamic threat, I want to give credit to Dr. Bill Warner, who provided the information, and somebody I'm proud to know and consider a friend. Unfortunately, he won't be available for the show, but was good enough to allow me to use some of his information. And so you'll see some of the sources here. Center for the Study of Political Islam, that's international, that's CSPII, it's a volunteer nonprofit organization, and that's something that Bill Warner was the founder of, along with others. Our concern is with the part of the Islamic doctrine that deals and relates to and affects non-Muslims, which they call us kafirs, and therefore is political. And their website is cspii.org. So now, keeping in mind the threat of Islam and our open border, I want to talk a little bit about the doctrine of evil, what you need to know about political Islam. The Islamic doctrine of Christians and Jews. This is one of the sources. This is from Dr. Bill Warner, CSPI Publishing, Nashville 2010. Talks about the Abrahamic faith. The concept of an Abrahamic faith that is a common bond between Christians, Jews, and Muslims is a favorite bridge-building talk. If all three are of a common origin, they should have similar ethics. Christianity and Judaism have a common ethic based upon the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Islam has no golden rule, but has dualistic ethics, with one set of ethics for Muslims and another set of rules for kafirs. That's all of the non-Muslims. Christians accept the Hebrew Bible as being true. Islam says that both the Torah and the Gospels are corrupt and not fit for spiritual guidance. Being of the same Abrahamic faith makes it difficult to explain the extensive Jew hatred in the Quran, the Sirah, and the Hadith. There is more Jew hatred in the trilogy by both percentage and total content than in Mein Kampf. So much for the Abrahamic Brotherhood. U.S. border migration and Hijra. Now, Hijra is an Islamic term, and basically that is their responsibility to go and conquer other places. So political Islam is the parts of the Islamic doctrine that affects the non-Muslim, known as the kafir. It's linked to Islamic immigration. The jihadis are following a 1,400-year-old ideology taken from the Quran, the Hadith, Muhammad's examples, and the Sirah, his biography. The migration of Muhammad and his followers from Mecca to Medina is called the Hijra. In Medina, Muhammad established the political aspects of Islam and created the Charter of Medina, which divided Muslims from all others they called kafirs. With the migration, jihadis with the Islamic community insinuate themselves into the fabric of the host country in a well-organized manner and use jihad, the struggle for the cause of Allah, in all its forms, with the ultimate goal being submission to Muhammad and Allah. Now, not all these things they do are necessarily violent, but they all have the same goal. U.S. migration problems. The issue of illegal aliens and refugees streaming across our southern and northern borders claiming asylum has finally gotten to the attention of the U.S. public and media. Mass migration at the southern border of the United States has contributed to a breakdown in counterterrorism efforts which endangers our national security. This is from U.S. Customs and Border Control. They flagged 74,904 illegal migrants nationwide for potentially posing risk to national security between October of 22 and August of 23. Islamic jihadis smuggled into the country are a special concern to the security of the nation. But many of those who pose a danger to our security are not here illegally. 65 Afghans granted refugee status after American troops were withdrawn from Afghanistan in 2021 were found to be terror risk. Surprise, surprise. Earlier in 2023, a group of Uzbeks who requested asylum at the Mexican border were screened by the Department of Homeland Security and released in the United States pending a court date. Later this year, U.S. intelligence officials found that one of the smugglers who brought the Uzbeks across the border had ties to the jihadi group ISIS. The Uzbeks have yet to be found. Uzbeks are classified as a special interest alien since Uzbekistan is an Islamic country and Uzbek jihadis have committed serious crimes in the U.S. In 2017, a 29-year-old Uzbek migrant drove a truck into a crowd in New York City, killing 8 people and injuring many others. Another Uzbek migrant who had posted an online threat to kill then President Barack Obama in the name of ISIS was arrested in 2015 and found guilty of terrorism charges. Todd Bensman with the Center for Immigration Studies reported on an interesting migrant shelter in Tijuana, Mexico, a few blocks from the U.S. border. The first Islamic shelter and mosque expressly for migrants, Albuquerque, Asabi, Miskawali, and I'm sure I'm mispronouncing all this, Tabia, caters to the special needs of the Islamic community and includes a mosque, a local imam, religious education, Islamic halal food, male-female segregated sleeping facilities. The migrants can stay for one night or they can live at the shelter for an extended time. They don't have to answer questions that would disclose their plans, either entering legally as refugees or being smuggled into the U.S. The migrants arrive each day from all over the Islamic world, including Yemen, Syria, Afghanistan, Pakistan, Lebanon, Egypt, Morocco, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Somalia, and other countries in the Middle East, North Africa, and South Asia. History and background of the Hijra, the Islamic political migration. The media uses the word terrorist in the article sourced above, but a terrorist can be a person of any race, creed, or political ideology. For clarity's sake, jihadi is the word used here for Islamic terrorist. A jihadi follows the fundamentals of the Islamic doctrine, an example of Muhammad and volunteers for jihad, a struggle in the cause of Allah, and who is willing to commit violence and to die for this cause. Jihadis are following a 1,400-year-old playbook of ideas composed of the words of Allah in the Quran, the examples of Muhammad's words and deeds in the Hadith, and the life of Muhammad and his biography, the Sirah. These texts are the basis of all Islamic doctrine and describe Muhammad and his life in detail. Muslims have an obligation to follow the example of Muhammad and use his life as a template for theirs. In the Quran, Allah says 89 times to obey and follow Muhammad. According to the Quran, verse 33:21, Muhammad is the perfect pattern to follow. Ye have indeed in the messengers of Allah a beautiful pattern of conduct for anyone whose hope is in Allah and the final day and who engages in the praise of Allah. In the Quran, verse 4.80 states, he who obeys the messenger Muhammad has indeed already obeyed Allah. In order to understand the jihadi's motivation for immigration from Islamic countries to the United States, it's imperative to know the doctrine of political Islam. The motivation must be set in the context of one of the most profound events in the history of migration of Muhammad and his followers from Mecca to Medina in 622 CE. It's such a momentous event that the Islamic calendar begins on this date, and it's given a special name, the Hijra. So political Islam can't be separated from the immigration issue. The two are inextricably linked. Why? Muhammad linked them with the concept of Hijra, Islamic migration. For years in Mecca, Muhammad preached his message of submission to Allah. The word Islam means submission, and that he was Allah's last and final messenger. He collected few followers. I think about 150 is the number I've heard historically. Instead, he caused dissension and quarrels among the Meccans, so they plotted to kill him. Muhammad and his followers immigrated to Medina, a town of Arab and Jewish tribes where they were offered sanctuary by converted Muslims. They settled there and established a new base of operation. The Hijra began a transformation of the Islamic community from a small religious sect to a united Islamic community, the Ummah. The Hijra signals the beginning of the politics of Islam, the formal division of the Ummah and the non-believer, kafir, that's you and me, and the designation of the rules that separate them. Political Islam is therefore the part of Islamic doctrine that relates to the kafir, an examination of the politics of the Hijra. Muhammad and his followers settled into a new life in the Medina, built a mosque used for community religious practices and education, for political/war strategy gatherings, and a home compound attached to it for his family. He became a political figure and was responsible for the Constitution of Charter of Medina. The Constitution of Medina describes the relationship between the Muslims from Mecca and the Medinan converts and the Muslims' relationship with the Jewish tribes and the polytheist Medinan Arabs. The Constitution of Medina functioned as a basis of law and governance and gave Muhammad power over the non-Muslims. The Constitution of Medina said the Muslims are one community, the Ummah to the exclusion of all others. They could be friends to one another, but not to disbelievers. What Muhammad did with that constitution was to set up a political system that was not based on the traditional Arabic model of tribal blood affiliation, divided all people into the Ummah, which is the Islamic community who followed Muhammad and Allah, and the non-Islamic community of Kafirs. They were different rules prescribed for Muslims and Kafirs, thus establishing the principle of duality as a fundamental part of Islamic doctrine and law. Muhammad and his followers needed to make a living, so under his leadership they became powerful warriors, making raids on trading caravans, fighting battles with other tribes. They took the defeated tribesmen and their women as slaves and kept their stock and possessions. After giving Muhammad and his family 1/5 of the booty, they kept the rest divided among themselves. After many successful battles and raids, Muhammad and his followers conquered Mecca, took over the Kaaba, the sacred the sacred center of Arabian polytheism, and made it the holy place for Allah. When Muhammad died, all of Arabia was under Islamic rule. His example of the migration process from Mecca to Medina is a prototype for Islamic political migration. Hijrah begins with sending out a small group who learns about the new culture and its political structure. The Muslims and their families immigrate, settle into the host society, building mosques as a center for the community, religious and political cohesion. The community lives near the mosque, keeping their own laws. When the Ummah is large and strong enough, jihad begins. The completion of Hijrah signals the beginning of jihad. According to the Hadith of Muslims, 33:125, Muhammad said, "There is no Hijrah now, but only jihad," that's fighting for the cause of Islam, "and sincerity of purpose have great reward. When you are asked to set out on an expedition undertaken for the cause of Islam, you should readily do so. The Hijrah affects all non-Muslims for its goals. Their goals are to revive jihad, strengthen the Islamic community, the Ummah, and to establish its authority over the host country for the sake of the cause of Allah. The ultimate goal of Allah, Muhammad, and the Islamic Ummah is for all people to submit to the Sharia, the Islamic way of life. It's a submission plan. The pattern is continuing today. Islamic migration to the United States, as well as other countries in the 20th and 21st century, follows a pattern that Muhammad set 1,400 years ago. But the difference today is that due to our technical innovations, global communications, and transportation, this hijrah throughout the world has accelerated. So based on Muhammad's example, Islamic migration begins with a small group which settles in the host country. When the group is large enough, the next steps are taken. They build a mosque that functions as a religious, social, and political center. They settle around the mosque, building a block of immigrants who start their own businesses and infrastructure that caters to their particular needs. Set up organizations with representatives to interact with the Kafir society, meeting local Kafir groups and engaging in proselytizing, which is known as dawah, and politics. They explain to the media what they want the public to know about Islam. Migration continues, the community grows more and more powerful. Mosques embrace those coming in, create an environment to spread political Islam. As a result, violent jihad against the Kafir increases. Look at France and other places in Europe. While Islamic politics in all its forms insinuates itself into the host country's power structure, gains political offices, and advocates the Islamic way of life like halal food in public institutions and prayers in schools. The Muslim Brotherhood in America, they are everywhere. And CARE is another one, Center for American Islamic Relations. Those guys have infiltrated everywhere. History has shown that when the Islamic political structure goes large enough, it becomes a powerful social, economic, political force that dominates and controls the host country. For instance, Lebanon used to be a Christian country, but it's now Islamic. Islamic migration brings oppositional political sides into our country. The power behind these ideas is protected and nurtured in the mosque and by the Islamic organizations. And jihad in all its forms implements them. Remember, jihad is not just violence. There's jihad with money, Sharia-compliant finance, and there's other things, anything they do to advance the cause. Hijrah was a momentous event in history. It's celebrated because it brought political Islam to a new territory and made it victorious with jihad and politics. Since it is mentioned in the Quran, Muhammad's biography, and examples from his life, Islamic migration has been and will remain systematic and inherent in political Islam. Hijrah has proven itself to be an effective means to transport political ideas across borders. Must understand the development of the Hijrah as a pattern followed by political Islam if we are to defend our nation and continue our heritage of freedom and government as stated in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Islam is totally incompatible with the U.S. Constitution. Islam is incompatible with civilization. So we have plenty of threats to be concerned about with regards to our open borders by those that will likely cross or may have already crossed. When you consider the doctrine of political Islam, the necessity of closing the border becomes even more important. Having said all that, there are no shortage of Muslims and Muslim organizations in Tennessee. Matter of fact, over the last few weekends in Nashville, there have been pro-Hamas demonstrations. And you've had, you've seen some groups with swastikas. You hear them say from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, meaning kill all the Jews. You see politicians showing support for Hamas. Not just showing for support for maybe some of the Palestine, I'm showing support for Hamas. So you have that here in Tennessee. So that's a scary thought. There's a lot more to be said about both our borders and the threat of political Islam, and we'll cover as much as possible in the future. In the meantime, I highly recommend cspii.org or anything put out by Bill Warner. Contact your state rep and senator and relay your concerns. Ask them what are they doing to secure our state. Thanks everybody for watching, and if you enjoyed the program, please hit the like button and subscribe. Our guest next week will be Robin Steeman with Moms for Liberty. Join us and find out how our state is promoting the pillars of Marxism in our schools. Hey, it's not just the federal government pushing this stuff. Thanks for watching. See you next week.